It's time for Reason.
You have to be persistent. There's a difference, though, between that and obsession. The progressives and the Democrats in the state of Kansas do not understand the difference in persistence and obsession. There is no good in any way, shape, or form that would come out of an idea like expanding Medicaid programs. It has now turned into an obsession because you have a political agenda, not because it's best for the people of Kansas.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Then I get on my knees and pray. We don't get fooled again. Don't get fooled again.
That's what I'm talking about. Welcome into the Voice of Reason, broadcasting live out of the heart of the nation here in Wichita, Kansas on the Big Talker KQAM, simulcasting on KGPT TV, channel 2610, and across the entire Mid-America network. What's up? What's happening? Good morning to you. It is a brand new week, a brand new day, a brand new opportunity for you, my friends, to carpe diem all over this place, make it a good one, have a little fun, and utilize the day as it was intended to be utilized. It's a full moon this morning, which means some people may be waking up grumpy. Some people may be waking up a little bit odd or different. It always seems to happen around the time of the full moon. But nonetheless, we get the opportunity to make it a great day. It is a Monday. Let's go ahead and start it off the right way. As you know, we like to get you pumped up, ready to go for not only for the day, but for the entire week. Why? Because it's going to be a good one here on The Voice of Reason.
Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here.
There we are, 316-721-8255, 316-721-TALK. If you want to join into the program, you're more than welcome to do so. I'd love to hear from you today. We're going to have a lot of fun, have a lot of great guests lined up, ready to go. A lot of great discussions. It was a busy weekend in Topeka as the state legislators were trying to wrap up their veto session week, their wrap-up week, whatever you want to call it, and they were busy all weekend long. I got a call from a state legislator over the weekend, just angry, just frustrated at what's going on up there, as not a whole lot of news, big news, good news came out of it. I guess one of the good pieces that did come out was the sales tax when it came to the Kansas State Fair. If many of you have been following that one, that there was a talk about the sales tax from when you go to the state fair and purchase something, purchase a beverage, a food, a good, a product, or whatever may be sold there at the Kansas State Fair, that the Kansas State Fair actually gets to hold on to some of that sales tax and to be able to keep it for the state fair, to be able to reinvest into the state fair. And for whatever reason, maybe it was expiring, maybe someone tried to move it, someone tried to change it, whatever the case was the fact that it was going to go away and they were not going to be able to retain part of that sales tax. And it was all going to go to the government. And the government wanted to have that sales tax because, of course, they deserve the money, right? And I guess that was one of the good pieces of news over the weekend, was that the fact that they did vote, and it was a good vote in the House. It was 117-2, so it was a decent vote on that one to be able to allow the Kansas State Fair to retain some of its own tax money. That's good news. That's about the only piece of good news that did come out of the state legislature over the weekend. They did fix the quote-unquote $80 million error when it came to educational funding, and they allowed that money to be able to be moved forward. The new 5-year, $525 million plan to answer the Kansas Supreme Court's ruling to the state aid to public education was constitutionally unsuitable. They think that this is going to be able to fix it. We'll see if it does. The Kansas Supreme Court will have to review this, and then they could potentially call back legislators to call them back into a special session to be able to address again. There was a bill that was presented by State Representative Brenda Landwehr that we will discuss a little bit in the second hour that got shot down, but it may be revived again. It was a potential for a plan if the Supreme Court comes back and says that it was unconstitutional. So there was another plan. I think it was an interesting plan. I think it was a good idea. I think it completely misses the boat on what the priorities for us need to be. The priority for us needs to be, we need to stand up to the Kansas Supreme Court. Period. End of story. They are not going to bully us any longer. They are not going to tell us exactly how much money we have to spend. They're not going to tell us whether it's suitable or unsuitable anymore. That's our decision as the Kansas legislators and as the ones who are actually elected by the population, by the people, to decide exactly how much money we're going to spend on education, not the Kansas Supreme Court. And that's what the priority needs to be. And we need to stand up. We need to grow a spine. We need to grow some McNuggets. And we need to actually be able to stay strong on what our authority and what our power actually is. Because the Kansas Supreme Court will not dictate that any longer. So we did come out with the $525 million. They did, right now, the spending error that was the $80 million is floating around like $67 to $80 million. We're not sure, depending on where they're shifting the money around and what they feel like doing at the time. And our increased budget, ladies and gentlemen, increased budget for the state of Kansas, $1 billion. $1 billion. We're going to be spending and voting on potentially an increase in spending by $1 billion, with a B, $1 billion across the board for more spending in the state of Kansas. Now tell me, ladies and gentlemen, where we're going to get that money. Oh, we just raised taxes, right? We'll be able to use that. No. That tax increase that we did retroactively last July, the new tax increase that we're seeing in January, when you filed your taxes, a month ago, a few weeks ago, if you waited till the deadline, the 17th of April, then what was it? The average tax that people owed was close to $2,000. And we, ladies and gentlemen, did not actually use that to spend money on the more increase of $1 billion, but that was actually to compensate for the $1 billion that we were short last year. So we were just even. We were squared. We were done. And then we just increased spending, potentially by $1 billion more. That's going to be voted on by the end of this week, but it sounds like it may go through. The House was debating hard over the weekend on a new budget of $1 billion. A few of them did propose, again, a reduction of sales tax by 1%, and it didn't go through. 1% sales tax on food reduction didn't happen, didn't go through. The legislators didn't want it. Why? Because they don't want you to have any type of tax relief. Remember this going into the election. I don't care whether you're a Republican, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a moderate, whether you're an independent, whether you're a libertarian. I don't care. Remember this. You had an opportunity to be able to go to the grocery store to purchase food with a 1% less tax, sales tax on that, so you can actually, buy more food without actually having to pay up the wazoo to be able to purchase that food. And your legislators, Republicans and Democrats alike, voted that initiative down. And we got to give credit where credit's due. State Representative John Whitmer, out of the Wichita area here, was the one that proposed that numerous times. Got shot down every way. Every which way. Especially the Democrats that love the fact that the government gets all your money. They love the sales tax idea. They love the fact that you have to pay up the wazoo for your groceries. When you go to the grocery store and try and pay for groceries, they love the fact that you have to pay an extremely high sales tax rate because they're getting the money, they're benefiting from it, and they are just eating it up, my friends. They're loving it. 2-3 times over the weekend, there was the potential for a sales tax reduction to be dropped into a bill, into a spending bill, into a tax bill, into a sales tax bill, into maybe even the Kansas lottery bill, which we will talk about as well. Didn't happen. Got shot down. Committees wouldn't even accept it because they do not like the fact that you could be spending less on your groceries. It's absolutely unbelievable, isn't it? 316-721-8255, 316-721-TALK. The other piece that did come out as well, according to the Topeka Capital Journal, Kansas Senate plotted through 4 hours of debate on Friday before narrowly blocking a bill lowering the state's share of gambling revenue at dog and horse racetracks. If you remember, we chatted with Race for Kansas. That was the fight trying to lower the sales tax on gambling for horse and dog racing. And why we haven't seen horse and dog racing in the state of Kansas for a really long time, because a lot of the casinos, they came out, they didn't like the fact that you could be gambling elsewhere than just at their venues, and therefore they had the special interest to raise the sales tax up on racing, on horse and dog racing, and now there are no more tracks. No one can afford it. No one showed up. It's too expensive. Because the sales tax rate's close to double or triple what it is for you to go to the casino and be able to gamble there. So they brought up the bill, which I thought was good news. Let's bring back some horse racing. Let's bring back some dog racing. Let's bring back some of the gambling on that sense. That would generate, by the way, more revenue at the statewide level, giving you more money because we would be gambling and having fun at the track. And what happened? Oh, no, senators couldn't even vote for that. 17-20, and that one getting shot down. The amendment that would have enabled Kansas lottery retailers to engage in sport wagering if the U.S. Supreme Court ruled state-by-state prohibitions to be unconstitutional, allowing us to be able to do horse and dog track racing. But again, we shot that down, which makes you really wonder what kind of special interests are actually being involved in influencing many of our state legislators of the fact that we can't lower the sales tax on horse and dog racing. So overall, if you notice, the weekend was a bust for our state legislators. They are ramming through whatever they want to ram through. They're blocking anything that isn't part of their agenda. They're blocking anything that isn't part of their prerogative, what they want to get through by the end of the session. They want to increase spending by $1 billion. They shot down every potential idea to be able to lower sales tax for your food. They shot down the amendment to be able to lower sales tax on gambling for horse and dog racing, and they just increased your spending. Does that sound like a representative government to you? Does that sound like a government that actually gives a damn about your family budget, your family taking care of itself, being able to go out and do what you choose to do so with your own money? It doesn't really sound like it to me. It sounds like we need to vote many of these individuals out come the midterm elections. We need to remember this. And this is not the way they wanted the session to go, mind you. They did not want to see this at all because they wanted to go out looking very nice at the end of the session, so that way they would have an easier time getting reelected in the midterms. This is where you and I turn out. This is where you and I show up, and this is where you and I start getting very angry, and we show that when we go to the voting booth come this fall. This is The Voice of Reason on a Monday. Stay here.
Reason with Andy Hoosier on the Mid-America Network.
Welcome back into the Voice of Reason on a Monday morning. It's great to have you along. 316-721-8255, 316-721-TALK. If you want to join in, you're more than welcome to do so. What's on your mind? At the bottom of the hour, in just a few minutes, we're going to play an interview we did on Friday with Gregory Wrightstone, author of the book Inconvenient Facts when it comes to climate change, global warming, all that good jazz. We chatted with him on Friday. It was a great chat. We'll play that one coming up in about 6 minutes from now. Until then, it's open line to you, 316-721-8255. It was a beautiful weekend. Finally, we're starting to get some consistently warm weather where we can actually get outside and enjoy. Got to go out and utilize the lawnmower and the weed eater, and got to go and work on the yard. And the wife and I were outside having a great time, and it was just a lot of fun being able to get out. You could probably see if you're watching TV or on Facebook Live, I am a little red, got a little sunburnt. That's all right. I am. It's nice until you try and go to bed at night and your shoulders are so red and so burnt that you can't move, and no matter which way you turn, you just feel really, really uncomfortable. Other than that, actually might get a little dark this year and might actually not glow in the dark. Shocker, right? That might actually be a good positive thing. 316-721-8255. As frustrating as the legislative session is for this next week and how we're not going to see a whole lot of positive news come out of this, look, we're not going to see a single thing come out that we're actually very proud of. We're really not. We're going to see a budget come out that's going to be an increase in spending because they want to increase spending every single year. We're going to see a lack of tax reductions because they see it as their revenue now, and therefore once you see the revenue come in, you don't want to see the revenue go away. They think that as long as we coast and coast, because we've seen, 8, 9, 10 months in a row with tax receipts better than projections, that we're just going to continue to roll along here. And then that's not going to fund our new programs and fund our new spending. That's going to compensate for what we've been spending already. We're not going to see anything good come out of that. We are not going to see I guess the good news is that we did shut down Medicaid expansion, and they're still crying for that one, but we still have an opportunity to keep that one at bay. They did try and bring that up in committee again. That one did not go anywhere. So Medicaid expansion, I guess that one is out the door, and that is a good sign. We are not going to see a lowering of sales tax for food, a lowering of sales tax for the horse and dog racing, and we got a ways to go. We got a ways to go to fix a lot of issues here in the state of Kansas. Now, in Oklahoma, I do have to give a shout out. As of Wednesday of last week, they did vote on a very good bill to allow them to have constitutional carry in the state of Oklahoma. That one voted in the House 59 to 28. That one going over to the Senate. But that is good news. The bill would allow law-abiding Oklahomans to carry a loaded concealed handgun without a permit, permitting handgun owners in the state to carry their weapons in most public places. However, some areas do still have prohibited by law where they're not allowed to carry. But for the most part, constitutional carry down in Oklahoma, that is very good news, and that at least came out. See, they're advancing while we're trying to go the other direction here in the state of Kansas. So we got to work on that a little bit. 316-721-8255. Let's go to the phones this morning. Line number 1. Good morning. What's your name?
This is Pete.
Hey, good morning, Pete. How are you?
I'm good, sir. I was thinking about your opening monologue, and you were talking, of course, about the state Supreme Court and education funding.
Yes.
And the more I think about this, I think, if I understand your tack on this, is you're saying, hey, look, we need to rein in the Supreme Court.
Absolutely.
And while I don't disagree with that, I think we need to look at the real root of the problem. And that is the Supreme Court can't do anything without a lawsuit being brought before it. So what we really need to look at is this lawyer from Wichita who keeps bringing all these lawsuits.
Sure.
And where is he getting the money from? Who is funding him? And if we're finding out that it's taxpayer money that should be going to educate our children, that's in turn ending up in the pocket of this lawyer to be used to sue the state for more education funding, that's kind of a conflict of interest on whoever's funding this lawyer, isn't it?
It is. You're right. And it is exactly who that is. It is you and I, the taxpayer, that's going into this. Over $7 million over the last few years have gone to the litigation that's coming out of the school district, that the school district is paying, meaning it's going into their general funds. Now they're saying that it's not the money coming from the state of Kansas coming into their general funds, but it's their other money, whether it's local property tax or whether it's the money coming in from the federal government as a grant sort of thing. But it doesn't matter. It's in the education's general funds where the school districts have bound together and called on Ellen Roop, the attorney, and said, hey, please represent us, go to the Supreme Court and fight for more money. So we are using our taxpayer money to fund a lawsuit to sue ourselves for more taxpayer money to go into the system because we don't have enough money going into our education. That's exactly how it's working right now.
Well, exactly. And I think that now, while I agree with you, the Supreme Court are useful idiots in this case, and they do need to be reined in. I think we need to look at this Alan Roof, and I think he needs to get an anal exam as far as the finances. And we need to find out where all this money's coming from.
Sure.
And that's where we need to turn off the spigot.
We have a lot of issues we need to work on. You're right. We need to not only limit the Kansas Supreme Court because they've tried to bully their way into many issues, education being really the priority one right now, but they bullied their way into that one, told our legislators who own the power of the purse on where our money needs to be delegated to. They've then, you're right, we've used our taxpayer money to fund a lawsuit to sue ourselves for more money. We need to have an amendment on there as well to say that we're not allowed to use our own taxpayer money for a lawsuit to sue ourselves for more money. That's been tried. It's failed numerous different times. We need to look at the local school boards to tell them exactly how to appropriate their money, along with being able to limit the power and authority by Alan Roop. I appreciate it, Pete. You're right. You're right. We have a lot of work we need to work on here. It's kind of a multi-dimensional issue that we need to address that we just have not been able to fix as of lately, and we allow it to just renew over and over and over and over.
Defending the rights of every Kansan.
I'm not being aggressive, I'm being dominant.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Hey, welcome into it. Great to have you along today on a Monday morning, starting off your week the right way, baby. Better than a cup of coffee, a shot of espresso, even an energy drink, the way we like to roll. Right here on the Voice of Reason. I am Andy Hoosier. It's great to have you along today. 316-721-8255, 316-721-TALK. I do want to get back to the educational funding, the Supreme Court, the budget, all that stuff in just a little bit. There's a lot more to cover on there, as it was a very big weekend, a very disheartening weekend, if you want to call it that, in our legislature. And we'll get some more recaps from our legislators coming up on that in a little bit as well. But I want to shift gears just for a bit. As you know, Gregory Wrightstone was on the show on Friday. Maybe you heard it, maybe you didn't. But he wrote the book Inconvenient Facts, the Science That Al Gore Doesn't Want You to Know, talking about climate change. As you know, here's my prediction. It is getting warmer outside, which means it's probably global warming that's causing that, not because it's actually summertime. So this is Gregory Wrightstone on Friday. He sat down with us here on The Voice of Reason talking about climate change and his book Inconvenient Facts. It's Mr. Gregory Wrightstone back with us. Greg, how are you, my friend?
Andy Hooser always gets there first. Yeah.
That's right.
I was there with you before I got on Joe Pags.
First off, let's talk about Earth Day, because it seems to be dying down. I read the story that over the last few years, really, that Earth Day and the activist movement of climate change has kind of died off a little bit. There's not as much enthusiasm about it, but everybody still likes to hold Earth Day up as the day that we get to be maybe not drive your vehicle, not burn any fossil fuels, not use any, probably not exhale either, because that would be really bad for the environment, probably not cause any flatulence, because that would be harm and detrimental to the environment. But your take over Earth Day over the last few years, have you seen a decrease in the progressive movement, or have you actually seen it increase with some of their activism and with what they want to try to promote?
Yeah, it's there's a feeling I get that it's actually decreasing, and I also have a real sense that people are really turning around on this catastrophic man-made global warming nonsense. That I really feel that. I speak at a lot of scientific meetings, and I'm warmly embraced by the scientists there. In fact, the usual reaction I get after I talk is people coming up and vigorously shaking my hand afterwards. And I get very little pushback. I get pushback online from the Facebook crowd and others. Of course, they demonize anybody that dares question Al Gore.
Sure.
But I have a true sense that perhaps it's the Trump effect. Perhaps it's Scott Pruitt and Ryan Zinke being appointed to Interior and EPA and trying to roll back some of this nonsense. But no, I'm very optimistic about getting some true science, facts, and data back into this, rather than political science into the discussion.
Sure. And
that's a lot of it's been driven by a political agenda. It's being driven by politics instead of science, and it's selective science, not and that's where we've been having, and a lot of the funding from the universities. If you're not going to write something that's pro catastrophic man-made global warming, you're not going to get the funding. I think that's changing. I'm very positive.
Oh, I'm glad, and I'm glad to hear that. I'm also hoping that people, once they begin trying to debate and actually dialogue in this, I know sometimes on the left-wing side of the aisle, it's very difficult to dialogue because we're stuck in our little safe space and don't like to hear opposing views. But if they are trying to, then maybe some of the, like you mentioned, some of the facts and information that you and others have been able to actually try and get out there are coming out, and they're having a hard time trying to debunk them or trying to counter these. So they're falling silent and not necessarily trying to push that agenda so much because they know they're in a losing battle.
Yeah. There's your listeners are going to hear some things over the next 10 minutes or so, or 15 minutes, that they've never heard unless they were tuned into the first interview or that they bought my book. Things like forest fires, catastrophic heat waves, droughts, increased heat mortality. They're not increasing like we've been told. They're decreasing. And the experts tell us it's because, and this kills them whenever I say that, all those things are decreasing, and that's factual. And the experts say it's decreasing because of increased temperature and increased CO2. And their heads spin around and their top blows off whenever I say that. And I think I sent you some stickers, I believe, my I Heart CO2 stickers.
Yes, I have some. And actually, for the camera here, for the cable channel, and for the Facebook Live, we do have it there, the book and the, I Heart CO2 with the Inconvenient Facts, and I love that. So the question I have is, with the increased temperatures and increased CO2, is that caused by human activity, or is that caused by natural effects?
Well, we've seen, the thing I like to say about temperature is that the only thing constant about temperature is it's never constant. And it goes up and down for thousands, millions, hundreds of millions of years.
Sure.
And it's all been naturally driven. And what Al Gore and his ilk want your listeners to believe is that those natural driving temperatures, suddenly ceased functioning at the beginning of the 20th century. I don't think so. That's not the way it works. But again, don't be a denier. We have been adding CO2, and CO2 is a greenhouse gas. So there has to be some contribution of warming, and I would argue, and most of the people on my side would argue, that warming contribution is fairly small and greatly overwhelmed by the same natural forces that have been driving it. I mean, we can look back. The current warming trend we're in started in the year 1695. And for the next 40 years, the rate of increase of temperature was greater than any time since. So what we're seeing today is not unusual, and it's not unprecedented. And we also saw that about the same amount of temperature increased from that year of 1695 to about 1850 has increased since. So, and that whole period had to be naturally driven with zero effect.
Sure.
So, this is what we're talking about, is natural forces driving temperature.
Natural forces driving temperature. I've always been fascinated because this big movement really started, I don't know, the 70s or the 80s, when they started off with the global cooling, and then they went to the acid rain argument, then the global warming, and now it's just climate change because they just don't know really which way it was going to go with the ups and downs and the changes, and whichever way now apparently just fits into their narrative because it's so vague and broad. But I have always asked the question is if we were contributing to that and we were making things so terribly bad, why didn't we see that same type of argument back in the early 1900s during the Industrial Revolution, when we didn't have filters on smokestacks, when we were still starting to drive vehicles and we were having the factories all over the place, but yet we weren't hearing that narrative of, oh yeah, all of this stuff's destroying the environment, and now we're starting to see warming temperatures, or we're starting to see some type of effect.
Yeah, well, in my book, the last half of the book, I deal with what I call the climate apocalypse events, and I will argue that all these bad things that they're predicting are just that, predictions. It's speculation. It's based on climate models that can't really model climate very well. So we're looking at, what I do is I live in the real world, and in the book I look at actual data of what's actually happening. And rather than rely on these failed climate models, we can look and see, and I would argue that we've had rising temperatures for hundreds of years. We've had increases in CO2. Shouldn't we see some reflection of all the bad things they're talking about? Shouldn't we see, they will tell you that forest fires are increasing. And I love using forest fires because the example is so clear, and the experts are so clear on this, that, that the forest fires have been decreasing for more than 100 years. And the experts say it's due to climate change. The experts say it's due to increasing temperature and increasing CO2, which are leading to soil moisture content across the world. And it's that increased soil moisture that dampens the fires, that dampens drought, that dampens the heat waves. It's a really, really feel-good story that's not being told. And in fact, NASA, if your listeners are near a computer, they could Google NASA, greening, and Sahara and see what they get. So it's not Greg saying, oh, the Earth is getting better. It's NASA. NASA says that 50% of the planet, up to 50%, is what they call greening. Only 4% of the planet is what they call browning, or loss of vegetation. That's a really good story. I'll take that any day. 50% improvement, 4% going the other way.
Absolutely.
And again, NASA attributes it to climate change, increasing precipitation based on higher temperatures, and more soil moisture retention due to the CO2 fertilization effect. Those two combined, and that's greening the Sahara. If they Google that, they'll find that 300,000 square kilometers of the southern Sahara, it's called the Sahel, is greening. It's turning into a lush grassland. People are moving back in there that haven't lived there in hundreds and thousands of years. That should be a feel-good story that should be on the front page of the New York Times, but it's not, and it won't be.
Well, of course not, because it doesn't fit the narrative. It really doesn't. And I mean, here in Kansas, we've already seen forest fires early on this season, and it's been a little bit drier. We've had our wheat conditions that are a little bit worse than they have been the last few years because of the lack of moisture, but we've seen some rain the last couple of days. But you can't judge just one tiny little area of the world, of the globe, and say, oh, look, this isn't getting what it needs to, so therefore climate change is actually ruining things. Yeah, we've seen some earlier forest fires here in Kansas this year, and yeah, it's been a little bit drier, but that does not mean to say, like you said, in the other part of the world, they're seeing more moisture and things actually happening, so that's just the way things are.
Yeah, the Canadian Fire Service are true experts in that. In the book, I have a lot of information from them, but they did a worldwide study, worldwide being the northern hemisphere, of forest fires over many decades. Actually, going back to the turn of the 19th century, and they found a long-term decline of forest fires that they attributed to rising temperatures and increased CO2, and they predict that increasing CO2 and increasing temperatures will continue to depress forest fires as we move forward in the future. Your listeners have probably never heard that.
Can't say that we have.
No, it's a feel-good story, and feel-good stories don't sell papers. They don't get people to watch TV. It's much more riveting to watch homes going up in flames than it is to watch a kid playing basketball on the street.
There it is, Gregory Wrightstone, author of the book Inconvenient Facts. We chatted with him on Friday talking about the climate change, global warming, and seeing the narrative that's not being promoted by the mainstream media. Al Gore talking about making his new documentary. He better get some of his facts straight because it's kind of funny to watch that the scare tactics of climate change and how the world's going to end because of what we're doing to it just don't seem to fit what's actually really happening with real numbers and real facts. But again, progressives, they just don't like real numbers and real facts because they like to live in their own delusional worlds. This is The Voice of Reason, wrapping up hour number 1. Stay tuned.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Into the Voice of Reason, wrapping up hour number 1. Welcome aboard. 316-721-8255. Having more fun than what we're supposed to be doing on a daily basis. Waking up you the right way as you head off into the workday. Driving off into I would say the sunset, but it's early. So driving off into the sunrise, starting your day. 6 minutes at the top. 316-721-8255. 316-721-TALK. Thanks again to Gregory Wrightstone coming on the show on Friday. We had to play that interview again. I thought it was fascinating with the talks of CO2, with the fact that CO2 is actually doing good things. I know. Now, listen, again, progressives, trigger warning right now. Just to let you know, trigger warning. That way you know what's to come here, but just to let you know that the climate's going to be changing and it's going to get warm, and because of that, it's not necessarily a bad thing. At the same time, we are seeing the headline that, where was that? It was on, I believe it was on Topeka Capital Journal, the website, with some news from the AP about, guess what, global cooling is officially here. It was a story that I found a link on Twitter. Global cooling is here. Now it's beginning to cool off again for the most part. I guess we could see that. It was a delayed effect when we really saw the summertime this year. We haven't seen as many tornadoes in the state of Kansas as we usually do by this time of the year. It is not necessarily as hot as it usually is this time of the year. Now it's finally starting to warm up. I'm enjoying this. I like going outside early in the morning when I'm driving into work at 4 a.m. and not have to be wearing a jacket. That makes me happy. I know a lot of people like the cooler-ish weather. I like being able to walk outside in the middle of the night or early in the morning and not have to wear a jacket. We were working on our landscaping over the weekend and working on, weed eating and lawn mowing and trying to clean up some of the yard and trying to get it all ready. And my wife hung up the lights outside so that way we go into the back porch and we'll be able to have our little fire pit. And we have some lights stringed up and we have our little tiki torches, and it's going to be a beautiful thing. And it's nice because it's the reminder of summertime that we can actually go outside and enjoy without having to bundle up. It drove me nuts. And I know some of you that came from other places or Colorado used to drive me nuts that you'd walk outside during the summertime, mind you. Now, I lived at 10,000 feet, so that probably did something along with that. But you would go outside, and it'd be summertime. It'd be 80, 90 degrees up in the mountains, and you got to be careful because you're 2 miles up into the air and a mile closer to the sun, and you got to wear the sunscreen for sure. I hate sunscreen, though. I hate sunscreen. I will never wear sunscreen. I don't care. And you're going to get skin cancer. You know what? There are generations of people long before us, of the human species, before we even created sunscreen, that never wore sunscreen, and they lived just fine. Now, they only grew to the age of 30, but you know what? I stand by my point. I hate sunscreen. But, you would go up there and you would see and you'd have to wear the sunglasses because you didn't want to burn your eyes because you were really close to the sun. But it would be really hot. But then as soon as the sun would go down, the mountains would block it, it'd go down a little bit early, and as soon as the sun would go down, it would go from 80 degrees down to 40, and you'd have to wear a jacket, and you'd have to be really, really close to the fire because it was cold. I hate that. Drives me nuts. I like the warm weather. I like it. Got to find a place to where it's consistently 70 degrees year-round, because I kind of enjoy that nice warm weather. I know a lot of people are going to call me up and say, Andy, you probably should have used some sunscreen, because if you are watching, my forehead is a little red today. I did get sunburnt over the weekend. My shoulders are what's really driving me nuts. You try and lay down in bed and you can't get comfy because, your shoulders are just red and just hurting. I tell you what, though, one way to get rid of it, and one way to help to where it doesn't start peeling, but it actually turns into a nice tan, is that cold compress. I got done Saturday night, got the big bowl of ice water with a washcloth, and you just draw the heat out. Just lay it on your back or on your sunburn, and you just draw the heat right out of it, and then it turns in nice. So hopefully, knock on wood, we won't actually see any peeling or anything, because that drives me nuts too. But the sunscreen, I'm sorry. I will do the cold compress, and I will get rid of and draw the heat out of a sunburn before I will actually wear sunscreen. I'm sorry. I will not do it. It drives me nuts. Now, I will put a little bit on the baby, obviously, because her skin obviously is a little more gentle and fragile. But I will tell you right now, I will not ever wear sunscreen. Ever. Drives me. The stickiness, the greasiness, I just don't like it. I just don't like it. I don't know how many of you actually have that little pet peeve too, but it's one of my annoyances of just putting on sunscreen. Bothers the heck out of me. 316-721-8255. Let's shift gears a little bit. Coming up, hour number 2, we got a lot to talk about. We have an amendment happening at the statewide level that if the Kansas Supreme Court does not find the finances adequate for school funding, what we do after that, so we do not have to have a special session. Plus, we have a lot more to get to. Jim Bohannon, nationally syndicated radio host, will be joining us in the 8 o'clock hour, along with your thoughts and calls. Hour number 2 of The Voice of Reason coming up real quick. Stay tuned.
Speak. It's time for Reason.
You have to be persistent. There's a difference, though, between that and obsession. The progressives and the Democrats in the state of Kansas do not understand the difference in persistence and obsession. There's no good in any way, shape, or form that would come out of an idea like expanding Medicaid programs. It has now turned into an obsession because you have a political agenda, not because it's best for the people of Kansas.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Then I get on my knees and pray. We don't get fooled again. Don't get fooled again.
Oh, yeah, welcome into the Voice of Reason, hour number 2 of the Voice of Reason, broadcasting live out of the heart of the nation here in Wichita, Kansas, on the Big Talker, 1480 on the AM side, 102.5 at the FM side, KQAM, simulcasting on KGPT TV, channel 2610. Welcome aboard. Good morning to you. It's great to have you along on a Monday. Oh, yeah. We try and get set up for the day. We try and set the tone not only for you today, but for the entire week. Getting excited, getting ready. Let's have a little fun today. What do you say?
Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it started.
That's the way we roll. 316-721-8255, 316-721-TALK. It's open line to you for this hour. Whatever you want to talk about, you're more than welcome to do so. Coming up in hour number 3, Jim Bohannon, nationally syndicated radio host. You hear him at 9 p.m. here on the KQAM airwaves. He will be joining us, talking to us about the latest when it comes to maybe the caravan down on the southern coast, which we will talk about later today. Unbelievable, right? The fact that we have protesters and ralliers actually wanting to encourage these individuals to walk across the border illegally, and we have media down there watching them cross the border illegally, and we're just sitting there allowing it to happen. That's just a great thing, right? So we'll talk about that. Plus, we do have an amendment that was shot down over the weekend, but it still has potential, I think. I don't know if it's good news or bad news. We'll talk about it when it comes to our state legislative session. Not to mention, we did just vote to increase spending in the state of Kansas over $1 billion with a B. Yes, $1 billion over the next years. And right now, I have not heard a single thing about the constitutional amendment to try and limit the Kansas Supreme Court. So there's a lot to get to and a lot to talk about today. But I got to spend a minute just for a second, and vent. This is kind of my outlet here. And if I don't vent, then I go home and my wife gets all grumpy with me because then I vent to her all the time, and I sound like my 3-year-old child who ends up just whining and complaining about a lot of things, and I don't want it to turn into that. So I need to vent just for a second. And over the weekend, it was a great weekend, by the way. I hope you got to enjoy it as well. It was beautiful and sunny out, and Saturday we went out and we got to work out in the yard, and we got to mow, and we got to weed eat, and I got a little sunburnt, and it was a great time. Just got to enjoy the sun, got to enjoy the outdoors. It's that time of year, and it's nice now because it's perfect without it being too terribly hot. I don't like it when it gets up to the 90 plus, then it's just not comfortable being outside. And it's going to happen soon. I mean, global warming's right around the corner, right? But I was out there and I was working, and then I thought it was the really good idea to take off the shirt and try and get some tanning on the chest and on the back and all like that, and just trying to be all macho and show off for the wife a little bit and kind of do that thing while we're working. And then I got extremely sunburned. But the point that I was making, the point that I'm trying to make, is I got a new weed eater. And it's awesome. It's a gas weed eater, and you got to get the gas and the oil mix, and you mix it all up and do your thing. So that way I can actually edge my lawn. And I got to finally, it's been a while since I've been able to do that, so I got to edge my lawn, and I was really, really excited and happy about this. The problem is that you have to do, unlike the lawnmower with the weed eater, you have to do the gas and the oil mix, like the 50-50 mix. So I went to the store and I got the mix, but when I had to do that as well, I had to get a separate gas container, right? Because you cannot mix the straight gas with the gas oil mix for the weed eater as opposed to the lawnmower. So I had to get another small little 1-gallon container for the gas can for the gas and the oil mix. And I think I complained about this last summer at about the same time as well when I got my other gas can a couple years ago. But the stupid, and this fits appropriately with the Gregory Wrightstone global warming climate change junk that we've been discussing, and the Environmental Protection Agency and the ridiculous regulations that come out of the environment and trying to regulate and save, quote unquote, save the environment. And I bought the gas can, and for the life of me, I cannot figure out how to use the stupid spout on the gas can. And it drives me nuts. I don't know how you're supposed to. I see that you can screw it on. You open it up and you flip it around and you stick it back in and then you screw it. Then you got the hose out there. But then how do you actually get it to come out? Because the stupid Environmental Protection Agency that puts on these regulations so that way you're not spilling gas everywhere, puts on these other things so that way you have to push the button or you have to hold it down or you have to twist it or something in order to get the gas to actually come out of the spout. So that way you don't drip it. So I got angry enough and frustrated enough that I gave up on the spout. I opened it up completely, and then I tried to dip it in from there. The problem is that you spill gas everywhere. So thank you, Environmental Protection Agency, for creating a stupid little mechanism to try and save the earth from us spilling gasoline everywhere, frustrating us and angering us enough that we don't even use it, and then wasting gas by spilling even more of it onto the ground than what we used to do so when it was a regular spout. Thank you very much. I feel very environmentally friendly right now by actually saving the earth by spilling more freaking gas on the ground, wasting more money with how expensive gas is, by trying to dump it into the not only dump it into the gas container itself, but then trying to dip it in from that into the weed eater because you had to put some kind of ridiculous little mechanism onto the spout of the gas can to try and save us from spilling gas everywhere. And it doesn't work. And I went through the exact same thing a year or two ago when I bought the original gas can, my big 5-gallon one, to try and put it in for the lawnmower. And I had it for the lawnmower, and I was really excited because I got a brand new gas can, and I was really excited about it. And then I ended up not knowing how to use that one, and then I broke it, so that I didn't even know how to use it. So I ended up stripping away all of that stuff, and I don't even use it anymore. I was trying to convert this time from the big gas can to the little gas can to mix it with the oil, and I was just spilling it all over the place because I wasn't using the spouts because the spouts don't work. I don't know if anybody else is having this problem or if it's just me being the blonde and not knowing how to work the mechanism. But this is the way it works when government gets involved with the everyday workings of you and I. This is what happens when the government tries to regulate something to make it better and make it more efficient, and they make it completely absurd and ridiculous and inefficient, and it doesn't work, and it's actually more of a hassle and more of a burden and more of a problem than what the original problem was. And we've tried to use that example all the time when we talk about education, when we talk about corporations actually producing stuff going into the air, when we talk about anything the government gets involved in. They come out and they say, oh, look, there's a problem here. We need to regulate this. Oh, healthcare. Look at this. There's a problem with healthcare. You need to start regulating healthcare and make it government regulated. We need to have the government control it in X, Y, and Z. It's the stupid little gas can. I got a message. Read the direction, dummy. No. You know what? We're men, and we don't read directions. Nor should we have to read directions. It is a gas can, for crying out loud. You open it up, you turn on the spigot, and you dump it. That's all you have to do. That is the way that a gas can should work. And if you're half intelligent, then remember the old one? You pull the spigot out, and it's like you didn't even have to unscrew it and then flip it around and do the whole thing. It was actually just like a thing. You pull it, and it goes grrr, and you pull it out, and you get the spigot, and then you dump it, and it's fine. And it worked beautifully. And you maybe spill a little bit with the drippage, but you didn't have to worry about it. I don't know why this became an issue all of a sudden a few years back when they said, oh, hey, let's regulate the gas can. And now you have to do the little, twisting little spigot mechanism thing. And I tried it. Don't worry, I tried it. My big 5-gallon one that I got a couple years ago, I sure tried. I tried my darndest to oblige by that, and it didn't work. And then you have to, hold it as you twist it to tip it, and then you try and get it to go. And it didn't work, and enough times I got frustrated that I would twist it too hard, and then I ended up snapping it and breaking it. So it doesn't even work anymore. And now I bought this little 1-gallon one, and it still doesn't work. And I didn't even try it. I screwed it on, and I gave it one attempt, and it didn't work. So then I had it completely open, and I had the other one completely open, and I just spilled gas everywhere. And I was really angry because gas is expensive, and I don't like to waste it. The struggle's real, my friends. 316-721-8255. 316-721. Maybe I should have read the directions, but come on. Number one, men don't read directions. We figure it out on ourselves. And number two, if it's too damn difficult to figure out by ourselves, then we jerry-rig it to make it work efficiently because we're men and we know how to make things work easily. We don't complicate things. And if it doesn't work because it's too complicated, then we find a way to simplify the process. It should not be a very difficult process to actually use a gas can, right? Phones are lighting up. Probably people call me a dummy, but you know what? That was my venting of the morning. I was very frustrated over the weekend because you spend all this money on a new gas can, end up spilling gas everywhere just because the government wants to save you from spilling gas everywhere. Drives me nuts. Let's go to the phones. Line number one. Good morning. What's your name? Scott, what's going on, sir?
Well, you have to use a funnel on everything nowadays.
Well, yeah, but come on. Isn't that even more of a pain that you got to use an extra piece of equipment to not... if you just had the spout that would work normally, then you wouldn't have to use a funnel. But now you have to go get another piece of equipment to go get a funnel to put the funnel on there so that way you're not trying to spill gas everywhere.
Yeah, but what you're basically describing is the socialism that is controlling the people now. Because, right now, they use safety and environmental issues to legislate to the people things that they ordinarily would have free will to do. Now, right now,
Sure.
you have the city or the county, they'll come in and try to tell you, well, you can't grow a garden, you can't do this, you can't build a fence.
You can't have a lemonade stand to be able to sell lemonade for a quarter with your kid. You can't do that because it's really bad and it's not FDA approved.
And they use safety and environmental powers to do this stuff because there's really no laws or anything that they can use, so they have to try to use that clause of safety and environmental, and they'll use those words a lot because that's kind of their catch-all phrase to implement policies and things that are not laws. They're just something that they just think that they should be able to make you do.
Oh, sure. Yeah. They tell you that it's all for environmentalism. It's all for the children. It's all for the atmosphere. And we're going to save everybody. And then people feel all warm and cozy about it. And then they end up regulating it. And then they turn into, oh, hey, if we just have this really cool, fancy mechanism to be able to, you got to push here, twist here, and hold it here while you tip it. And then it'll work. And that way you're not spilling any gas all over the place. Then you'll feel really good about yourself because you spent money on a new gas can that doesn't even work. Scott, I appreciate it. And you're absolutely right. It is the implementation of the government. Look, this is when government gets involved, stupid things happen. And this is the prime example of it. Gas cans were never a problem before, but now all of a sudden they became a problem, and we have to find a new mechanism to be able to actually let the gas flow out of a gas can. I got a question. How much did the gas can actually cost? Yeah, it was, well, for the tiny little 1 gallon one that I got, it was right about like $10. $10 for the thing that doesn't even work. So the spout doesn't even work, so I can't even pour it appropriately. So now I got to go get a funnel because I have a funnel, but it's for my oil changes, not for the gas. So I got to get a new oil, a new filter or a new a funnel, and then that way I can dump it without actually spilling the gas and actually pour it into a funnel. Because now you get to buy new products because the government, again, is extremely inefficient. First world problems. What do you say? Let's go back to the phones. Line number 2. Good morning. What's your name?
My name is Eddie.
Good morning, Eddie. How are you, sir?
Oh, Andy. Do you realize I've listened to your show every day? A year ago, this is an exact repeat.
I know. It's the exact same thing, and it's frustrating because I bought the can last year for the gas, and now I had to buy another one for the gas and oil mix for the weed eater, and now I had to go through the same problem, and it infuriated me all over again. It drives me nuts.
Andy, take that Al Gore gas can and toss it in the trash. Now, for your mental health, go to one of these Salvation Army used stores, Go in there and find you a gas container that's in good condition, that's about 10 years old,
yes,
and pay $1.50 for it, and take it home and use it and have a peaceful summer.
That's exactly what I have to do. That's what I need. I didn't even know where I'd be able to find some of those old ones because I remember my dad's used to be one of those to where it was the old one where the spout was just like the little hose thing that you just pull out of it and it would be just fine and you wouldn't have to. And I never spill any gas with it at all unless sometimes the seal was not completely sealed or tight or something. But yeah, it was a very simple, easy process and it was not the pain in the butt that would infuriate me every time you try and use it.
I have a new gas container I bought a couple. I have never been able to use it. What I have to do, and yes, it is a little sloppy, I have to unscrew the major little cap on it, and I just pour it in. But, Andy, today, go to a used flea market, someplace like that, or maybe a garage sale that has an old one, and pay your $1.50 and go home, and your wife will be thrilled to death.
Oh, she will be very happy about that because I was cursing all day. Care. I love it, Eddie. I appreciate the phone call, my friend. You're right. I got to find an old one. The old stuff always works better. What do they say that that you can't beat the classics? You definitely can't beat the classics when it comes to an oil or a gas can. And it's sad, right? Just something little like a gas can infuriate you. It's just the little things. Things are running smooth. You got the work, the outside projects going. You're mowing the lawn. You're feeling really good. I mean, come on, as a guy, you love being able to go and mow the lawn and make the outside make the outside look nice and good and pretty and primed. And you got the weed eater and look at that line. It's really nice and defined right by the concrete, right by the sidewalk. Yeah, that looks pretty. And then you go to the gas can and it just ruins the entire process, the entire experience. Let's slip in a few more calls here before break, shall we? Good morning. What's your name?
Hi, this is the Bleeding Heart Liberal.
Paul, what's going on, sir?
Hey, hi, Andy. Oh, I had a very interesting day Thursday on the bus with the folks from Americans for Prosperity.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to go. What'd you think?
Oh, it was very interesting. I heard a joke on the way up.
What's that?
I couldn't help. You might enjoy it. It went, African rhinos only have a spine and a scrotum. Oof. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I have a fairly good idea.
I can't say that I've ever heard that one.
I sure hadn't. It's right up there with the stuff like I heard in the Garden City bomb plot trial.
I can't say that I've ever heard that one, and I don't know. You say you heard that on the bus. I don't know that I can't say I've ever heard that one. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. Paul, I appreciate it. I'm glad you were able to go to that. I'm glad you were able to go to the tax rally. That was a lot of fun on Thursday, going up for Americans for Prosperity as we're trying to fight for some of the lower taxes. But I appreciate it. Got to take a break. Running late on one. Got some more calls on the line. We'll get your thoughts on the first world problems that we have with gas cans that are ruined and destroyed by the government regulations trying to help us save the environment, not spill gas everywhere. I'm sure it's been a problem for you as well. Maybe at least Eddie said he's had the same problem, so I'm not the only one. Not the only one that's gone through this frustration. Got to get some of the older ones. 24 minutes past the hour. Appreciate the call, Paul. Got to take a break. This is The Voice of Reason.
You're listening to The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier on the Big Talker, KQAM.
Matt on Facebook Live, message Andy, you can get a replacement spout on Amazon. I just went on Amazon and I found one. $12, you can actually get the original legit one. I know what I want for Father's Day. Isn't that sad? Let's go back to the phones as we go to the bottom of the hour here. 316-721-8255. Good morning. What's your name?
Good morning. This is Deacon.
What's going on, Deacon? How you doing, sir?
I am doing fantastic.
Good.
You're actually covering something that's been burning my rear end for a while.
Thank you. See, someone else is feeling the frustration as I am.
And, I actually watched a documentary on these new gas cans a while back. I can't remember the name of it. But a big reason why they went to these new spouts is because some stupid waterhead couldn't figure out that you don't dump gasoline on a fire out of a gas can.
So instead of actually using common sense to not dump gasoline onto a fire, they say, hey, let's create a safety hazard one to where you actually have to push the buttons and twist it and pull at the same time as you're dumping it. So that way, if you are going to be stupid, at least it takes some effort to do so.
Right, and now if every new gas can you buy, if you look, there's a picture of a guy and it says gas and fire don't mix. And in this the documentary I watched, this new gas spout actually put a gas can manufacturer here in the United States out of business.
Oh my gosh. That's outstanding. That's outstanding. Well, nowadays we all get to punish. See, that's one of those things where one person does something stupid and we all get punished for it. We see that with the gun debate. One person does something stupid and we all get our guns taken away, or they try and take our guns away. Now, one person tries to dump gas on a fire and they try and change our gas cans, and then it frustrates the hell out of us when we're trying to do our daily work.
Amen. Preach it.
Hey, I love it, Deacon. I appreciate the call, my friend. All right, I'm not the only one that's gone through the frustration. They have the gas can replacements the gas spout replacements on Amazon.com. Father's Day gift. Wife, I hope you're listening, Mrs. Voice of Reason, because I don't care about having an adult beverage or having a whatever else dads like to have on Father's Day, a new grill or something. I just want a gas spout. Can I have a gas can spout, please, just to be able to dump gas appropriately so I'm not spilling it out all over the roads and then, trying to not save the environment? This is the Voice of Reason. Stay here.
You're listening to The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier, your personal political therapist. Give him a call at 721-TALK.
There it is. Welcome back into The Voice of Reason. Actually, today I kind of therapied myself, apparently, with that one. Getting your thoughts on that. The gas can, the spout. Hopefully get that swapped out relatively soon. Now that I know that the options are actually still there. That's good news. 31672. Isn't it sad, though, as this Deacon had mentioned going into the bottom of the hour, that we have to have a documentary on why gas cans have changed? Drives me nuts. 316-721-8255, 316-721-TALK if you want to join in. Coming up at the top of the hour, Jim Bohannon, nationally syndicated radio host. You can hear him live evenings here on KQAM at 9 p.m. He'll be joining us talking about some of the national issues happening that's been going on over the weekend, especially one of those like the caravan that's been traveling up north through Mexico and coming to the border, some of them crossing illegally, the nice little protesters that are welcoming them in, the media covering it, and yet nobody seems to be rounding them up as they cross the border illegally and throwing them into prison or shipping them back down. It's funny what our priorities actually are in the nation. 316-721-8255. Let's go to the phones here, shall we? Good morning. What's your name?
Good morning, Andy. It's Ron.
Ron, what's happening, sir?
Just living the dream.
Hey, that's
Beautiful
the way
day.
we roll. That's right.
Yeah. Over the weekend, there was an article about the new Southeast High School, and I don't know whether you might have read it or not, but now that since they've moved out there, they're having absentee problems. Okay, because they're on the outer edge, and it's 7 miles to the other side of the district. Okay, for the school, whereas before most of the district was within the big, like 43% was within less than 2.5 miles to the school. Now
so they
it's
built
less than 10%.
So they built a new school, and they built it so far out that many people are not able to get there conveniently. So now we're starting to see more students be absent from school.
Well, yeah, they're the biggest percentage are being bused, and if they miss the bus, a lot of them, may not have a driver's license. Their parents may have already gone to work. They have no way to get there, so they don't go.
No way to get there.
Because if they're 7 miles away, they sure as heck aren't going to walk.
Well, that's true. I mean, they're not going to be able to do that now. We could take this two ways. Number one, we could go after the school district for making it inconvenient for many individuals to actually be able to show up to this, which I can see. I mean, if we're going to be expanding the school district, that's a little concerning. On the second thought, do you think that maybe this might help the accountability of the student to actually want to be sure that they don't miss the bus, so that way they're not actually missing school?
Well, the thing of it is that the parents and legislators fought hard to recondition the school and keep it there within the neighborhood. And the parents said now they're going to have problems getting all the way out there if they don't have a vehicle and they can't get out to the parent-teacher conferences and stuff like that. So to me, it's totally no win. And they just built this Taj Mahal out there, which looks like a prison. If you ever drove by it and looked at it. Okay.
I have not seen that one yet, but no, you're right. I mean, some of these bigger ones, especially with all the security we're concerned about now at the schools, it'll look like a giant prison or a giant corrections facility, and then you get to go in there, and I'm sure that it's all nice and warm and welcoming for the students to learn really nicely there. Well,
the big thing is that their big hope was that they're going to get more money for counselors.
More money for counselors. Well,
yeah, and then I love this. The last sentence. Somebody said, "I hope we can get creative and find solutions." Is that like the dope from Hope and the dope that hopes?
Well, we're on the right process, right? I mean, we're going down the right road trying to figure a lot of this out as we are expanding our money for the building. We're trying to expand it for counselors, because that's really where the priority needs to be, Ron, is we need to have the counselors for when they feel very confused about life, then they have a counselor to help them, as opposed to the money in the classroom to be able to learn, so we're not too focused on our problems, but just focused on our schoolwork.
Well, their first year out there, their graduation rate is now at about 65%.
Well, it was a proper use of money to expand to that building.
Right. right.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
but see, to me, this lies squarely on the school board. The school board wanted this. They wanted to say, look at this beautiful building we built for the kids.
Oh, sure. They feel really warm and cozy about that one. I love it. Ron, I appreciate the call, my friend, very much. It really brings it to light. I mean, the school board, look, the educational system that we have, the public education system, 90% of the problems when it comes to the teacher pay, when it comes to the classroom, when it comes to investment, when it comes to the increase of the administrative, when it comes to sinking money into a lawsuit, 90% of that comes from the local school board. And that's what we have to start remembering. It's not the legislators. It's not the Kansas Supreme Court to some degree. I mean, what problematic issues there are at the state level, it is the Kansas Supreme Court and the legislature who refused to actually stop the Supreme Court. But 90% of the problem that's happening right now is the local school board. They're the ones that hire the administrators at the local level. They're the ones that negotiate the teacher salaries. They're the ones that hire a superintendent with their salaries. They're the ones that approve and hire a deputy superintendent or an assistant superintendent or the six thereof that go along with a school district. They're the ones that decide if we're going to be increasing a new school building. They're the ones that decide if we're going to be putting new AstroTurf onto a football field. The local school board makes all of those decisions. And yet when we hear about all the issues at the financial issues for educational finance, we look at the government and say, why is the government not giving us enough? Instead of looking at the local school board and saying, why aren't you appropriating the money appropriately? But we don't, because we just have different priorities for the government as opposed to the local school board. 316-721-8255. Let's go back to the phones. Line number 3. Good morning. What's your name?
Hey, good morning, sir. It's Drew.
Drew, how are you?
Doing good.
Good.
Doing good. I'm a little shocked with you, Andy.
Uh-oh.
I truly am.
Okay.
I mean, I'm disturbed. I mean, you sound practically like an apologist.
Yes.
I mean, seriously. First daring to blame the school board, the school district. The second, blaming the students. You and I both know there's a reason for the absenteeism, the reason why we have a school that just maybe doesn't serve the community like it should. That fault lies squarely with one group only, and that's the Kansas State Legislature.
That is true. The Republicans are probably the ones that are trying to do this, just like how they do voter suppression by condensing the voting polling areas for areas, so that way it's not convenient for them to show up and actually vote. We're doing this and trying to, if we draw the school buildings out farther in the district, then less students will be able to show up, and therefore we won't have as high of a graduation rate because we don't care about African-American communities or something.
If the district only had more money.
Yeah, if they only had more money, then we could deal with that.
They just need more money. They could have dealt with this problem appropriately. Now they have to go back and fix the problem. That means they're going to need more money on top of that.
We could have 2 rounds of buses. That way we could pay for bus routes to go twice. So that way if you miss the first one, then you could do the second one. And that way we could actually make it more convenient for the students.
And, of course, not having dealt with the problem right the first or the second time, they are going to have to mandatorily be sued, which is going to require more money on top of that. We have at least, 3 times now the money that they're getting to fulfill what they need to be doing with just one school. Now, how many high schools are there within the city?
Yeah, but it's not enough, Drew.
3 times every high school.
It's not enough.
The legislature's clearly at fault here.
Exactly. Drew, I appreciate it. You're right. The legislature's the one clearly at fault here. The Republicans don't care about children. They don't care about teachers, and they don't care about administrators, which is why we need to take this back once we do and we finalize this budget bill that's in the legislature right now for the last week of the session, and we send it to the Supreme Court for them to see the suitability and the equitability and the adequacy of our finance for education. Then we should be really waiting on pins and needles for what the Supreme Court says. And if they say that it's not enough, then we should come back for a special session. We should address it, give them more money, and then try and apply again because we need to appease them, right? That is the number one priority here. That's where we've been at. I mean, all of this absurd, ridiculous talk that I've been extremely sarcastic about, that's stupid because this is what's really happening. And people actually believe that this is the way that we need to be addressing this. And it's absurd. It is absolutely absurd. And now, unfortunately, we're not addressing the priority again. And according to the Topeka Capital Journal, we've talked to Brenda Landwehr about the state representative, and I love her to death. She's a solid conservative, but this issue, she created an amendment that got shut down over the weekend, but it's still potentially there, that says that if we go to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court says it's inadequate spending after this $525 million, that's really close to $1 billion because of what we increased last year and what's going to be accrued year over year over year for the next 5 years plus some. It's going to be over $1 billion. If this comes back and it says it's not adequate by the Kansas Supreme Court, then she says that the entire budget gets swiped, that we get to sink in as much money as we need to into public education, and then we start having the bickering for the other agencies. And I get where she's coming from, saying, fine, if people are going to feel the burn and feel the hurt elsewhere, then it's about time that they start feeling the hurt. And we're not going to increase our budget, but we're going to keep the budget capped, and then we're going to apply as much as you want to at education, and then the rest of the agencies can start bickering about what's going to get left. And the governor's going to have the appropriate ability to be able to dictate that. And she created this budget. In a way, I understand where she's coming from, because, fine, if you're going to feel the burn, you're going to feel the burn. And we're going to make sure you feel the burn. At the same time, though, this misses the boat completely, because why would we give the ability for the Supreme Court to come back and say it's not adequate enough and be able to consume as much of the budget as they possibly want to for education, and then for everybody else to get the scraps and the leftovers? Why have we not focused on the Kansas Supreme Court's constitutional amendment to limit the power of the Supreme Court to dictate our funding for education? Why is that not the number one priority and the only priority that we've had when it comes to educational finance? The number one only priority that we need to have. Why has that not been the focus? Oh, yeah, because we have legislators that are too scared to do that don't think that's the right way to go, that don't think that that's going to work, that don't think that's going to happen. We talked about it. It was close, and then it just faded off. Now it's potentially still could go somewhere by the end of this session, but by saying that, fine, you know what, having a backup plan so we don't spend money on a special session and allowing the governor to dictate the way he wants to dictate on that one, according to this amendment, it misses the boat completely. Stand up, let's fight, let's address, and let's fix this once and for all. Not a single penny more in educational funding. And oh, by the way, Supreme Court, you don't have a bit of authority over this. This is ours, is the power of the purse, as Congress, and we're the ones that actually get to address this, not you. Until we focus on that, anything and everything that we do is going to be in the wrong. 316-721-8255, 48 minutes past the hour. Take a break here, wrapping up hour number 2. This is The Voice of Reason.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Back into the Voice of Reason, 7 minutes to the top of the hour. It's great to have you along today on a Monday morning. Let's start it off the right way. What do you say? This portion of the Voice of Reason brought to you by the AARP, whether it's the Fraud Watch Network, the Retirement Calculator, or getting involved in the community. It does not matter. The AARP's got your back. AARP.org/KS for the state of Kansas. Marin Turner back on the line with us. Marin, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning, Andy. I'm just fine.
Very good. It's great to have you back. There's a lot happening with the AARP. One of them, of course, we've been talking about it quite a bit lately, is the upcoming Shred event on May 14th. We'll have some information on that in just a second. But talk about, you guys get involved with not only voter fraud or with fraud happening when it comes to maybe your credit cards or your email accounts or your checking accounts or your identity or that sort of thing, but also voter engagement. Talk about your voter engagement strategy you guys you've been working on.
Yes, we do have a very, very strong voter engagement strategy, as we've had for the last 32 years. We have a history of nonpartisan voter engagement. That means we don't support or oppose candidates. We simply put out information so that voters can make an informed decision. And this year, as part of our voter engagement strategy, we are teaming up with Politico magazine to do a lot of work to educate the 50-plus population. We are going to be conducting polls. We're going to be having forums. We're going to have a variety of events to number one, to find out what motivates older people to vote. in the 2016 election, we know that 90% of the registered 50-plus people voted, and and also earlier than that, 75% of the 50-plus registered people voted. And so we're just going to be polling the 50-plus population to find out what motivates them to vote. We also want elected officials and others to know that the 50-plus population is not a monolithic group. It is a group of diverse views, and so we will be making sure we get that information in front of them. This is going to be a very important election. We have Social Security, prescription drugs, Medicare on the line, and so we want to make sure voters are informed.
Well, it's really good to hear, and I'm really curious to see what some of the numbers and stats from the polling are going to look like when it comes to that 50-plus voting and what their say is on some of these polls and some of these issues, because you're right, we get lumped into this mentality that everybody in one generation votes and believes one way, while everybody in the other generations vote and believe another way, and so on and so forth. And there's really not that. There's a lot of diversity in all the different generations, and it'll be really interesting to see kind of what they have to say on these issues.
Absolutely, because the 50-plus population includes Gen Xers, Boomers, what we call the silent generation. So, yeah, it's not a monolithic group. And then on the state level, we're also going to be producing some video voters guides. And we're going to be talking about some state-specific issues, such as, how can we improve the quality of life for people who live in nursing homes? How can we make sure that people have enough money to save for retirement? And what can we do to make sure there is a range of options out there so that people can have housing according to what they need for themselves and their family, that there are enough transportation options so people can get around the community. And so we'll be doing a lot of things to engage voters for this midterm election.
Very good. Very good. That'll be a lot of fun. We'll have more information on that as you guys get information and some of the details of those polls and stats there. I do want to remind everybody, though, that and I have to thank you for this. You've ignited the fire under my wife to do the cleaning in the spring cleaning, to clean out all the paperwork in our desk and in our filing cabinet, to come out to the shred event on May 14th, as we have an entire box full ready to go to be able to come out and shred some of that stuff. So remind everybody again how they can be involved in this.
Yes, I know that people have gathered information to file their taxes either this year or in previous years. And if you're trying to figure out how you can destroy that information so that perhaps the crooks can't get a hold of it, you can come out to our Shred-a-thon on May 14th between 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock at the Dillons at 135th and Maple. You can bring up to 2 boxes of things that you'd like to have shredded, and we do shred on site. So we hope people will come out.
Absolutely. And just to remember, it's a limit of, you said 2 boxes. And again, one more time, just if people are cleaning out and they say, what do they need? What do they don't need? We really need what, about 2 years worth of tax returns to save, and the rest of them we can start getting rid of?
Well, it depends. There are some things you need to get rid of immediately, like your withdrawal, ATM receipts, and things like that. And then within a year, you can get rid of your pay stubs, your bank statements, some medical bills. And then after 7 years, you can start getting rid of canceled checks, W-2 forms, and things like that.
Very good.
Yeah, we have a whole list of things that you can look at on our website at www.aarp.org/KS.
for the state of Kansas. I love it. Marin Turner with the AARP. We appreciate it very much. We'll look forward to chatting with you again next week.
It's time for Reason.
You have to be persistent. There's a difference, though, between that and obsession. The progressives and the Democrats in the state of Kansas do not understand the difference in persistence and obsession. There's no good in any way, shape, or form that would come out of an idea like expanding Medicaid programs. It has now turned into an obsession because you have a political agenda, not because it's best for the people of Kansas.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Then I'll get on my knees and pray. We don't get fooled again.
That's what I'm talking about. That's it.
Don't get fooled again.
Oh, yeah, broadcast Broadcasting live out of the heartland of America here in Wichita, Kansas, right on the Big Talker, 1480 on the AM side, 102.5 on the FM side, KQAM. Simulcasting on KGPT TV, channel 2610 for the video feed. Facebook Live, online streaming, no matter where you may be, however you may be watching or listening. Welcome aboard. It is The Voice of Reason. Hour number 3 of The Voice of Reason on it's a Monday. Trying to start off your day the right way. Pump you up, get you excited, starting off the day better than a cup of coffee, a shot of espresso, even an energy drink. It's a Monday morning right here on The Voice of Reason.
Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it started in here. Let's get it started. Let's get it
That's the way we roll. 316-721-8255. 316-721-TALK. If you want to join in, you're more than welcome to do so. We'd love to hear from you today. Lots of happening over the weekend. The state legislature in their wrap-up veto session this week. Possibly raising spending over $1 billion. Joy, that's going to be fantastic. We have the educational finance debate. Will we have a constitutional crisis and go back into a special session that the Supreme Court says that we just don't fund our education adequately? We have that going on at the statewide level. At the federal level, there's a lot of big news happening that's happening very quickly. Some good news, some interesting news, and I want to touch on all that this hour with our next guest that I'm really excited to have back on the show. It's been way too long since we've chatted with him. You can hear him live weeknight evenings right here on the KQAM airwaves from 9 to midnight. Also, his best of program that you can hear on Sunday mornings from 6 to 8 a.m. It's Mr. Jim Bohannon, radio legend. Jim, how are you, my friend?
Hey, Andy. What a build-up. Thank you very much. I'll try to live up to all of that. It's always a pleasure to be back on the Big Talker.
Hey, I love having you on the show. I love having you on our airwaves. We love being able to hear you live in the evenings as things are going on, and we always enjoy having you on the program here first thing in the morning, so I appreciate that very much. The last time we had talked, I believe it was right after the elections, really, and President Trump was just kind of getting into the swing of things, and there was a lot of big news happening of what he was going to do as president. Over the last, really, the first year of his administration, now that we've had a massive tax cut, or not necessarily a tax reform, but a tax cut before the end of the holidays last year. We've repealed part of the individual mandate for health care. Now we're looking at some of the immigration stuff. Your thoughts on what's been happening and your take on the administration so far?
Frankly, I think the president has done a pretty good job, very honestly, especially given the near universal, unanimous opposition of Democrats who form, of course, a significant minority in each house of Congress. I think he's done quite a job. Obviously, the tax cuts, and now we're hearing about a phase 2 of tax cuts, which might include some new ways of perhaps saving your money, perhaps some tax-deferred kind of thing that they're talking about. We've also had, of course, those millions of new jobs that have been created after we had been told by President Obama that there was a new normal because we have to have all of these regulations that kill business and job creation. So the new normal is that we'll have a lot of unemployment and very slow growth. Well, guess what? The actual normal is we don't have to do that. We can have jobs and we can have growth.
Crazy how that works, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
I saw the story last week of 14 states recording record low unemployment rates, and that's, by the way, coming from red states and blue states, which really means that it's the national economy that's ticking up. We have actually now we're having the problem to where we have too many jobs and not enough workers, and we're trying to find ways to actually be able to fill this. So this is a good problem to have.
It is, absolutely. That's one of the main problems that's gone back many years, many administrations, is that while we've had unemployment, we've also, at the same time, had job openings. Just check the various listings out there, wherever they post jobs in the newspaper, help wanted ads, or Craigslist, what have you. But they're for jobs with certain skills, and it's matching people who have those skills. But there have always been job openings, and the problem is the unemployed usually aren't qualified for them.
Mm-hmm. The new entry-level positions, are we seeing maybe a tick up or a tick down from entry-level? Because we always hear about the fight for 15 and the entry-level jobs or the minimum wage jobs that need to be $15 an hour, which is going to, by the way, run out people that may not have the experience, young individuals who are trying to get some experience in the workforce, or individuals trying to maybe start all over again with their life, whatever the case may be. But between technology and then the fight for 15, are we seeing an increase or a decrease in entry-level positions across the nation?
Well, certainly you're going to erase a lot of entry-level positions. And keep in mind, of course, that very few people actually choose to live a life living at the minimum wage. Most people use this as an entry-level position. They learn a work ethic. They get a job track record. They can help pay for their school. But something that people need to keep in mind is we've seen a lot of automation. Trust me, there is a lot of automation that is out there right now, but it's sitting there because it hasn't been economically advisable.
Sure.
And there have been companies that have said, well, we can automate this, we can automate that. At the moment, the workers that we employ are economically more feasible. You raise that minimum wage to $15 an hour, and overnight, a lot of these companies are going to say, okay, that's it. Yep. Bring in the machines because they're now cheaper than these workers. So you'll see some people, sure, living on their $15 an hour minimum wage, and they'll see an awful lot of their friends who are simply out of work, living on unemployment.
Sure, which is going to create a whole nother issue by itself. I saw a piece of legislation Bernie Sanders is working on, of course, on the socialist side of that, wanting to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, but then also the universal health care, saying that everybody should be covered in that sense. We already repealed the individual mandate when we came to the tax cut to the end of last year. So the question is, I guess, is where's healthcare do you think is going to go from here? Are we going to go back to a more privatized healthcare system, or will we try a different type of socialized universal healthcare through a Bernie Sanders mentality?
Well, of course, Bernie is fortunate in that he happens to know that in the back of the Treasury Department there is a money tree. So we don't really have to worry about paying for all of this. We'll just go out and we'll pluck some leaves off the money tree every morning. Until that is fully grown, however, maybe we ought to avoid Bernie's approach to things. What can we do? Okay, we have certainly removed that individual mandate. At this juncture, any significant change in health care would have to come through legislation. You couldn't just do it through executive action. And there's simply no way that this Congress, and who knows what's going to come out of the November election, there's no way that Congress and President Trump would agree on something. So for the moment, I would have to think that we will limp along. I certainly don't see us going towards some massive single-payer type of healthcare system, and I don't even see some of what might be very beneficial privatizing reforms taking place. I think that for the moment, the public has given us, although the Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the presidency, we have, to a certain extent, the straight paralysis ticket being voted.
You think they're going to kind of just hold their breath until we get through the midterms to see what it's going to look like from there on out?
I hope they try something because I'm not sure what's going to come out of the midterms. I think there's every likelihood the Republicans will lose seats in the House. Whether they lose control or not is up for debate.
Sure.
In the Senate, it's going to be very hard for the Republicans not to gain some seats. I mean, the Democrats have 25 seats up, counting the two independents who vote as Democrats, and the Republicans only have 8 seats to defend. So it's almost certain, I think, that the Senate, since 10 of those 25 states are states carried by President Trump, that the Republicans will gain seats in the Senate, probably lose seats in the House. So I hope they try to do something now, but honestly, Andy, I don't see that they're going to have a much better circumstance after November based on what we're seeing now.
Sure. Well, I hope that the Republicans could campaign smartly. And if they do campaign smartly, I know we're hearing about this blue wave and all the Democrats coming in and taking over potentially the House, possibly the Senate, and trying to change in the tide here. But if the Republicans play their cards smartly, they could come out even ahead of what they are currently right now. I mean, right now we're seeing, as we mentioned, low unemployment rates and the economy doing well. Not a single Democrat voted for something like that. If we did try and reform health care the way that we need to, we could come back and say, look, we can actually fix something with health care. We can come back and say that with immigration, with the caravan coming up north into the Mexico border, that if we actually did something immigration-wise, then the base that voted for Donald Trump would show back up again and say, look, we're trying to do this. We just don't have enough numbers for the Republicans. We need to be able to get this through with Democrat opposition. Not to mention, if we start looking at North Korea as well and seeing that as a success from the negotiation standpoint from President Trump, if we actually showed all the great things, I mean, this would be kind of like the re-election of Ronald Reagan back in the day for his second term, to where there would be no question Republicans would have a majority.
Yeah, I hope that the Republicans will run smart. And again, as James Carville, the Democratic consultant, once so famously put it, it's the economy, stupid. Well, let's look at that economy. How are you doing?
Exactly.
As a matter of fact, is more people can say better than would say to the contrary. So that's what Republicans ought to be running on. I would agree thoroughly.
I would think so. We're speaking with Jim Bohannon. You can hear him live at 9 to midnight every evening right here on KQAM. Let's talk about real quickly the caravan that came up north. Over the weekend, I saw the Facebook Live and the media coverage of the caravan finally reaching the southern border, and there were the ralliers that were down there trying to encourage them to come across, a lot of them trying to come in illegally. I find it fascinating that we have people protesting and wanting them to come here illegally. The media's there covering them, watching them come over illegally, and yet we're not having a big push of saying, wait a second, we're seeing people cross our border illegally. What are we doing about this problem?
Well, we should be seeing more of that, of course. We live in a world of nation states. I'm sure that irritates the left no end, but it's true. The only alternative to the nation state is anarchy right now. There is no hold hands and sing Kumbaya one world out there, nor is there likely to be one for another couple of centuries. So in a world of nation states, the nation state absolutely has the right, I would go further and say the obligation, to determine who enters its territory, when, how many, how long, and for what reason. That is to say, it is an obligation to decide who comes in. Is this anti-immigrant? No. Does that mean we don't need any immigrants? No. And that's why the left is lying when they go through this whole anti-immigrant nonsense. It's not anti-immigrant, it is anti-law breaking, that we decide who comes in. Mm-hmm. Will we decide that some should? Absolutely. We should decide. That's the only issue here.
Well, and that's what we have to focus on. What's fascinating to me, and maybe you've seen it a little bit differently, but over, what was it, a couple months ago when we were fighting the hashtag Schumer shutdown and the government shutdown between the budget, and then they wanted to include the DACA reform into the budget bill, and we shut down the government for a good 3 days, and then we threatened to do it again because Schumer realized that they were in a losing battle. They reopened it up and promised that we would address DACA before the next budget ending, which was, 2 or 3 weeks after that, and then we kind of dropped it. We never heard anything from there. Do you think the Democrats right now are concerned that if they do a DACA reform and we did do some type of immigration reform, the Republicans would get the credit for it, or do they just not get the deal that they actually wanted to? Because we had a really good bill, in my opinion, come out of the House once that whole discussion was happening, to where we did compromise a little bit on DACA, but we ended the chain migration, we funded all the border wall that we needed to, and we took care of a lot of the business that we needed to, and then it kind of died off, and we haven't heard anything from immigration since.
Yeah, I think you're right. We were on the right track. If people say, don't you have any sympathy for those dreamers out there? And I would say, to the extent of those who are dreamers, that is to say that they're actually high school valedictorians who just can't wait to get out there and invent a cure for cancer. Yes, I have sympathy for them, not for the gangbangers who have come in under the guise of DACA.
Sure.
But I do have sympathy for them. However, you must keep in mind that as long as we do not control our border, as long as there is not a wall or a fence or something from Brownsville, Texas, all the way to San Diego, that it is really nothing more, in terms of dreamers, nothing more than an incentive for others to say, see, they made it, I'll try to send my kids across the border. They are an incentive for breaking the law. That's why the president was so right when he said that we need to have any discussion of the dreamers joined with border security.
Exactly.
If we had border security, and that is to say not perfect but reasonable border security, then the main objection I have to the dreamers would go away, and I would be willing to consider the possibility that we might let them stay under certain circumstances.
Exactly. I'm glad you mentioned that, and that's hopefully what we can see come out of maybe some of the results with this midterm election. Let's shift gears a little bit towards overseas. We've been very proud here in Kansas, and especially here in Wichita in the 4th Congressional District, where former Congressman Mike Pompeo, now former CIA director and now Secretary of State, I mean, he was our congressman here in the Wichita area for the longest time. He's a great individual, and I know we heard the story about the secret phone conversation he had with Kim Jong-un over Easter weekend, and the day that he gets approved in the Senate to become Secretary of State, he's over there meeting face-to-face with Kim Jong-un, setting up a meeting with him and President Trump. And then the very next week, we see the big announcement of North Korea and South Korea actually wanting to end the Korean War officially between the two nations. The question I have for you is, how much influence did President Trump, Mike Pompeo, and the U.S. administration have on ending this conflict?
An interesting question. Probably some. Obviously, the new South Korean leader has had a tendency to go his own way, and also a tendency to overlook the the barbarity that is on his northern border. And while it's all very nice and comforting to see the shaking of hands and the planting of a tree or what have you, and it's all very interesting to see the likelihood now that President Trump and Kim Jong-un will in fact meet maybe by the end of May or the 1st of June. I have not forgotten the fact, nor I would hope has the administration, not with people like John Bolton in there to advise the president, I've not forgotten that on at least 4 times in the past, the North Koreans have lied flatly about their intentions on nuclear weapons, going all the way back to 1985 when they didn't even have them yet, but said they had no desire to get them. This is not a country to be randomly trusted. Now they're saying they will allow inspectors. The devil is in the details. If you have as many inspectors as we are going to need to believe the North Koreans, I just don't see the most paranoid state in the world agreeing to that. If in fact they do, then maybe President Trump should write a second edition of The Art of the Deal, because that would be a master stroke if he can really pull it off. But I remain skeptical.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and I haven't heard anybody else say that because I've been skeptical as well. First off, the president of South Korea, as you mentioned, was a little bit different, and I remember during that election they said that it was the more liberal, progressive millennials that ended up voting him in because they wanted a little bit different change as opposed to what they've had in South Korea, which I think had a factor, as you mentioned, in this deal. And I'm almost concerned and scared that this is almost the false flag of kind of like what we saw right before Pearl Harbor, with Japan coming to the table and saying, yeah, we're going to work with you and we're not going to do anything, as they have their planes coming and trying to bomb us. And is this going to be the false flag of Kim Jong-un in North Korea trying to play nice, trying to let everybody's guard down, and then try and do something really, really stupid?
Yeah, I'm very concerned. We must proceed along those lines, and that's all we've been hearing from the administration.
Sure.
From John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, from Mike Pompeo, the new Secretary of State, that they are not starry-eyed, they are realistic, and that's fine if that's how you approach it. But I would hate to think anybody in this administration would have some kind of starry-eyed, Neville Chamberlain, peace in our time nonsense that we heard 80 years ago,
right,
and what proved to be the final blow, actually, to peace that Neville Chamberlain set up the beginning of World War II. Sure. By caving into Hitler. We'd better not do that now.
I am really glad you mentioned that, because that's the same concern that I've had. The good news is that I do enjoy John Bolton. I have been a big fan of him. I do trust President Donald Trump. I do trust Mike Pompeo. I do trust General Mattis. So I think we're in good hands. I just hope that you're right. They're not trying to pull the wool over our eyes in some way, shape, or form. Jim Bohannon, you can hear him live evenings from 9 to midnight. Also, his best of on Sunday mornings here on KQAM. From 6 to 8 a.m. Jim, it's always an honor to be able to talk to you. I love all the guests and discussions you guys have on your show, and I really appreciate you coming on here with us in the morning.
My pleasure. It is always great to talk with you, Andy, anytime.
I always love it. Jim Bohannon right there. Again, you can hear him live evenings here on KQAM from 9 to midnight. Let's take a break. We'll open up lines to you, wrapping up the show today. This is The Voice of Reason on KQAM.
The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Welcome back into the Voice of Reason. Wrapping up the show today on a Monday. It's gone by way too fast. It's open line to you. When we come back, we'll touch on anything you want to talk about. Let's chat a little bit about North Korea, about the caravan heading up to the U.S.-Mexico border, and more. Thanks again to Jim Bohannon. We love chatting with him. A plethora of information right there. Bottom of the hour news coming up. Your phone calls when we come back. This is the Voice of Reason. Stay here.
Everybody just have a good time. Yeah. And we gon' make you lose your mind. Woo. Everybody just have a good time. Clap. Party rockets in the house tonight. Oh. Everybody just have a good time. I can finish. And we gon' make you lose your mind. Yeah. We just wanna see you shake that.
Wichita's fastest growing radio show.
Something big is going on, and the American people need to know what.
The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier on the Big Talker, KQAM.
Hey, welcome back into it. Wrapping up the show today, 36 minutes past the hour. We love having you aboard. Welcome in, 316-721-8255, 316-721-TALK. If you want to join into the program, it is open line to you for the last half hour. What's on your mind? There's a lot happening both statewide and nationwide. Let's have a little fun with it. The caravan officially reached the United States southern border over the weekend. Caravan. They climbed the border fence cheering. Some enter U.S. illegally. Some make asylum claims. Supporters rally in San Diego to allow them to come into the United States. Only in America would we have people openly going to the border, rallying and saying, please come in here illegally. Here's the line of the border where it says this is one country, this is another country. We live under something called the rule of law. You know, when you actually go and you drive down the street, you have laws. When you get your driver's license, you have laws. When you eat food, you have laws. When you talk to people, you have laws. When you get hired, you have laws. When you get old enough, you have laws. When you drink adult beverages, you have laws. When you smoke cigarettes, you have laws. You have laws for everything. We have something called the rule of law, where you abide by those rules. And when you do not abide by those rules, then you get in trouble. And there are people on the borders that are rallying and protesting, wanting these individuals to come across that line as asylum seekers, to not be punished, and to come here illegally. Just walk across. Here it is. That's an arbitrary line put up by old white people, right? Yeah. That's what we have. The caravan's here. What should we do with the caravan? Isn't this why that we sent the National Guard down there? Isn't this why? Now, I posted it, and you could see the video of the ralliers and people trying to come across the border illegally. And this is, as I mentioned, this is where you have the water hoses. This is where you have tasers. This is where you have dogs, law official dogs. This is when you start using the force needed. And I don't care. Here's me sounding very heartless right now. I don't care. I don't care what your situation is. I don't care what your problem is. I don't care what your dream is. I don't care. It makes no difference to me. We have laws. We have rules. And you have to abide by them, regardless of what your situation is. And we have processes for that. If you want to come here as an asylum seeker, apply for the right card. Apply for the right process. If you want to come here as an immigrant and want to be naturalized because you love America so much, then come here legally. And I tell you what, going into the election, this midterm election, President Donald Trump and all the Republicans will look very, very good if they actually do something about immigration before the election. That will help them. Look, I think that President Donald Trump has had a huge impact when it comes to North Korea. I think that the Trump administration has had a major influence on what's happening with North Korea. And I saw a story over the weekend that thinks that Donald Trump should get the Nobel Peace Prize. Barack Obama got one his very first year, and he didn't do diddly. He didn't do a thing, and he got the Nobel Peace Prize. Donald Trump helps end the Korean War, and do you think that they're going to give him credit for it? And now they're saying, oh, he had nothing to do with that. That's not him. Look, he should already be able to run on that by himself for the presidential run in a few years, saying, oh, look at this. Yeah, look, I ended the Korean War. That's been going on for how long now? And I was able to help end that. With our negotiations, with our administration, with John Bolton, with Mike Pompeo, with General Mattis, with Nikki Haley, with all these other great individuals that are actually helping me do this on an international front. Then we can turn around and say, look, we have the lowest unemployment rate in 14 different states plus that are booming right now. We have the economy that's growing out of control. It's insane. It's crazy. Look at what we're doing. Mind you, not a single Democrat voted for that tax cut. Then you turn around and say, look, we repealed Obamacare. We repealed the individual mandate. Now it's time to fully repeal Obamacare before the midterm election. Then you turn around and you say, look, we funded the border. And if we have to shut down the government, then we'll shut down the government because first off, that doesn't change anything. We don't really care about the government shutting down. Second off, we're going to fund the wall. We're going to fund the border. We're going to enforce immigration. And if you do all of these things, every one of them, and you do that within the next few months. And oh, by the way, then you turn around and say, too, plus we're going back to a regular budgetary process. We're going back to the appropriations process. We're going back to actually doing the budget at the federal level the way we need to while we're starting to cut funding. We're passing a farm bill that has social program reforms and food stamp reforms. Could you imagine the voters that voted for Donald Trump, the Republicans, the ones that may be on the fence, the ones that left the party a while ago, if we did all of those things, we would not be worried about a blue wave in any way, shape, or form, it would be a massive landslide of Republican victories in this midterm election. It would be a massive landslide of another election coming up afterwards, with more senators, without more House members, with the presidency in a few years. It would be an absolute landslide. We wouldn't even have to worry about a single thing, because we would show that we do what we said we were going to do. We reformed, we cut, we invested, we helped international affairs, we made the country safer, we enforced our borders, we got rid of ridiculous government programs. I tell you what, I would definitely lock in a surefire support of President Donald Trump if he reformed the gas can hoses as well. Then I might really support him, right? If we ran on a platform like that of look at what we could do if Democrats were in power, but look at what we've done. It was a narrow margin. We had narrow majorities in both chambers. The House was a little bit more. The Senate was very, very difficult. And not only did we have a very small majority of Republicans, but we had an even smaller majority of Republicans that actually wanted to get things done, as opposed to go on about the same old mundane establishment, go along, get along, not do a whole lot, but pretend we're doing a whole lot, and then go back to these constituents and say they were doing a lot. But we actually did it. Not what we're going to do or what we could do with the Democrats not in control right now, but what we've done. A hard-fought battle, a very difficult situation, a very difficult vote, and we made it happen. Vote me in again, because I'll continue to fight like that. That's what you and I want from our elected officials. That's what you and I want from our government, from our representatives representing you and I, the constituents, the voters, the American people. That's what we want, is for someone to say, it was a hard battle, it sucked, I came out bloodied and beaten in the end of it like a boxing match, but you know what? We did it. We repealed Obamacare. We cut spending in the government. We enforced the wall, and we enforced immigration. We ended a 70-plus-year-old conflict in a war with Korea, and we're keeping tabs on the little guy, on Little Rocket Man, but but we did it. For the first time in how many years, a U.S. citizen stepped foot on North Korean soil without a gun in his hand, and that was Mike Pompeo, the man himself, right here from Wichita. Stepped on to North Korean soil, shook Kim Jong-un's hand, looked like he was about to break the little guy, and then said, this is what we need to do. You're going to end the Korean conflict. You're going to go through this process, and you're going to go out of your way to make it a really, really, really big deal. And if you try anything, we're not letting our guard down because we don't trust you. I mean, come on, you killed how many family members to help get into power? You've had the dictatorship with your family line for how long now? We don't trust you. We don't like you. But this is what you're going to do for good faith. Maybe, if you remember, North Korea wanted to cause this conflict because they used to get free goodies from us when it came to trade. Maybe this was some of the compromise. We'll start giving you some stuff again if you start making some really big changes on what you're doing. You're going to end the Korean War. You're going to stop your nuclear process. You're going to have inspectors come into the nation, and you're going to start treating people better. And China's going to be on this as well, because we talked to China, and you're going to do it. If we just run on that platform, saying, hey, President Trump got it done. What have you done so far? What have you done, Democrats? You've obstructed. You've blocked. You've whined. You've complained. You've gone to your cry closets. You've been triggered about the fact that Donald Trump's a fascist, about he's a Nazi, about the fact that he's a terrible human being. Guess what? We've done more in a year and a half with him in office than any president in the last 50 years, including Barack Obama. What have we done? What have you done? Other than whine and complain to the fact that he's there, you're still worrying about an impeachment process where we're actually repealing Obamacare. We've gotten the economy to boom. We've ended a Korean War, and we're starting to actually enforce the immigration again. We're doing it. What have you done? 316-721-8255. Let's go to the phones. Good morning. What's your name?
Oh, it's me again.
What's going on, Paul?
I'm trying to do you a favor. You weren't picking up any calls, so that's the only reason I called in the second time today.
No, go for it. What's on your mind?
Oh, well, actually, perhaps some people don't know the law real well, because to legally seek asylum, you have to be within the country you're seeking asylum to. And when this white trash we got into the White House, I phoned the Brazilian consulate in Houston and begged them to give me asylum, political asylum. It's too dangerous to live in this country anymore. And they said, don't worry.
Have you been persecuted?
Don't worry about it. Just come on down, they said. Don't worry about it. Just come down. Everything will be fine. And I lived there and worked there and speak the language and have an adopted family down there. And so.
Where's this, Brazil?
Yes, sir.
Oh, so this is a real story. You really called the consulate down there?
Yeah, I know. I called the consulate here.
The consulate here for Brazil.
Yeah, the Brazilian consulate in Houston, Texas.
Okay.
Which covers the region for this part of the country.
Okay.
So I got a visa. I could go down there legally, but I'd rather donate to my U.S. so-called citizenship to somebody who feels they need it worse than I do, somebody more desperate than I am.
Wait, so
it's always about 7 degrees in Brazil.
Oh, it's a beautiful place. I definitely have been wanting to go down there for a visit, not to change my citizenship. But doesn't that really say something, though, that we still have, even with the, as you say, which I don't care for the name calling per se, with the white trash in office, as you put it, but regardless of that,
not as bad as what I heard for 8 years when Obama was in office. In the White House.
But come on, we don't do the name calling on the show, and I mean we try to hold ourselves a little bit higher than that. But I mean, because we try to have it a little more substantial on both sides of the aisle from there. But regardless of the name calling, doesn't it really show, though, the mentality that even with President Donald Trump in office, we have people desperate to come into the United States because of what they're going through in their own countries, and we have individuals that just don't like the president, so they want to leave.
I don't think these people that want to come in here realize they don't watch the same news that you do.
Or is it not as bad as what some try to play on here, and that Donald Trump really isn't a terrible meanie head?
I don't know anyone in my family, or I can't think of anyone except perhaps my neighbor that doesn't think that way.
Well, have you been persecuted by Donald Trump?
Not directly.
Not directly,
no.
Well,
I didn't receive any benefit. I haven't received a single benefit either. So there you have it.
Well, okay, so you got affected indirectly by not receiving free goodies from the government.
No, I'm getting free goodies from the government, and I invested in by working in this country for 40 years. My Socialist Security retirement pension.
Sure.
And I'm proud to have it.
But you get that, but you haven't that hasn't gone away, so you haven't been impacted by President Donald Trump, and he hasn't taken away.
Yeah, he's traumatized me with his fear-mongering, racist fear-mongering.
Wait. So let's do the comparison, the apples and the oranges here, the two apples together. So we have asylum seekers that are coming from a country persecuting them, that are not allowed to speak their freedom of speech, because if they do, they probably get beheaded in many places. In many nations, you get thrown out 5-story buildings in the Middle East because you may be gay, and we have a real persecution, real genocide happening in the world, and many. Wait, hold on, and some people want to leave now. Because they have been indirectly affected because of the fear mongering, and it emotionally triggered them, and we're comparing that to the real persecution of slaves and the beheading and genocide happening around the world. It's the same level of the fact that we want to leave the United States because Trump fearmongers, and that triggers us emotionally.
The world's safer today than it ever has been.
You're right. It is safer today than it has been. But again, you had mentioned that you called the consulate to try and talk about asylum to leave the country. Because you were emotionally distraught about Trump's fear-mongering, and we compare that with the people wanting to come to the United States and saying that they don't understand what's really happening here because they may be emotionally triggered, which is going to be just as bad as someone who gets persecuted or genocide happening in their nation. And it's really compared to apples here, right?
Well, the way I understand it, their biggest fear is being murdered by the drug cartel.
Yes! But you're saying that they would
And
reconsider
it ain't
moving.
much better
Hold on,
here.
Mr. Hold Button. Hold on. I got to ask you this because they're concerned about the persecution of the drug dealers and what's bad in the murder that's going on in their nation. But they would reconsider moving to the United States if they knew about the fear mongering and the emotional triggering that Donald Trump would give them if they knew the kind of person Trump was. That's the same, and therefore they would reconsider coming here, right?
I doubt it. They would probably.
That's
still
what you
think it's
said.
better.
That's what you said. You said that if they knew what Donald Trump was like, then they would reconsider coming here.
No, that's what I said about myself.
Okay, so but again, still, so you're leaving the country for emotional triggering as opposed to real genocide happening out there.
My safety and peace of mind.
Have you been?
Look at my views. He would probably have me droned.
Has he have you droned yet?
Not that I'm aware of.
Has Miley Cyrus, who called him a fascist, has any celebrity who's called for the assassination of President Trump, who's advocated for the blowing up of the White House, who's advocated for the destroying of his wife or his child, has any of them who's threatened him physically in public been droned or attacked in any way, shape, or form?
Well, you used the word fascism. The root definition of fascism merely is corporate claims to constitutional rights. And Trump's definitely that. He has huge claims to constitutional.
Wait, hold on. We're not even going to go down that road yet. We're not even talking about that. That's completely changing the topic here. Have anybody has the safety of anybody who's openly called for the impeachment, for the destruction, for the murder of him or his family, or the harm of his or his family under what they call the freedom of speech of the President of the United States, including yourself, who is not who's not a fan of him? Has their safety been compromised in any way, shape, or form by Trump?
Yes, sir.
How?
I can give you a specific instance.
Okay.
The violence in Charlottesville between the alt-left and the alt-right. The alt-left.
How has that changed the safety of anybody?
Pardon?
That was directed. So the few individuals that got injured during that rally, that was because of Trump.
Basically, the alt-right thought they were safe to voice their views.
They are safe when they actually take the permits out and they rally peacefully.
As long as they don't do violence, yes.
Yes.
And that's why I can say what I'm saying right now.
Sure, exactly. That's the point, Paul. I got to take a break, but you countered yourself the entire time that you're trying to say that the refugees coming in here, the asylum ones trying to come in here, would second guess it because they would rather stay in a country that commits murder and genocide by drug lords as opposed to being triggered emotionally by a president that they wouldn't agree with, and that you would prefer to be in a nation that's completely safe for you, where you have no threats of harm against you whatsoever, but you have emotional triggerings by a president that you don't care for, and you would rather leave the safety of the United States, the greatest nation on the face of the earth, to go to another country because you may be emotionally triggered, and you admit that there are no safety events because someone who may disagree with the president, who wants to cause harm to the president, who has openly advocated for the harm of the causing of the president, would still be safer in this nation than anywhere else, and that we should hate the president and quote unquote fascist Nazi Republicans, not your words, but kind of the general theme of what's happened here, because we would rather live in a country run by drug lords and genocidal maniacs and dictators as opposed to a fascist like President Trump. It makes no sense to me, but you contradicted yourself the entire time. I appreciate the call very much, though. It's kind of a fun dialogue. 6 minutes to the top of the hour. This is the Voice of Reason.
The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Mind blown right there. Apparently the emotional distress that President Trump calls and creates for the progressives is equivalent to the asylum seekers wanting to come to the nation because they realize that the United States is the greatest place on the face of the earth, even with President Trump as president of the United States, and them coming from countries where genocide and murder and drug lords kind of run everything, the corrupt government, all that stuff, and they're trying to come to the streets paved with gold in the United States, even with President Trump, that they would reconsider. They would reconsider if they knew the emotional distress that President Trump caused for them. Even though they'll never, they can voice their opinion and say whatever they want to here without getting persecuted. It doesn't matter. The emotional distress by President Trump causes some to want to leave, while real asylum seekers are still trying to flood our gates. boggles the mind. This is your show. It's time to speak up, speak out, speak loud, speak proud, speak the truth, and always speak some reason. This is the Voice of Reason. Have a great Monday, everyone.